Welcome to Gamify Your Classroom with Shelly McAlister and Megan Brady from Arlington Local Schools.
The first topic we want to talk about is Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle is a site that uses YouTube videos. You can look up any videos, you can find them in YouTube and bring them over if they're not there already. You can create your own videos, anything you want to do, but it allows you to put in questions inserted into the videos that the students must answer. They could be multiple choice, fill in the blank, or just notes for them to observe, and they have to answer the question before they move on. The free version allows you to have 20 videos in your file or stash, or the paid version is unlimited for $11.50 a month.
Para abrigar bien el cuello, necesito una bufanda. Voy a echar esta de lana que tejió mi abuela. ¡Bufanda! ¡Adentro! Tengo unos guantes a juego con la bufanda para proteger las manos del frío.
Here you can see an example of a note where you can add something to clarify to students what is going on or highlight something that you really want them to notice.
Adentro. La cabeza también hay que protegerla del frío con un buen gorro. ¿Cuál me llevo? ¿Este del pompón o este otro? Creo que este me queda mejor.
Here's an example of a multiple choice question. If they get it correct, it'll turn green and say that it's correct. But if it's wrong, it'll actually show them the right answer. And what I like is that they can click rewatch at the bottom. So if they miss it, they can go back and re-listen and figure out why they missed it. They can also click rewatch before they answer the question. So if they're not sure about their answer, they can click rewatch, figure it out for sure, and then move on. From the teacher end, it's nice because when you assign it to a class, you can then go back and check each student's progress. You can see if they ever turned it in. You can see which ones they got right or wrong. You can double check and see, okay, I'm going to click on this one student and see how they did. It's got great data. Many of you are probably familiar with Quizlet, but we wanted to start with Quizlet because we can use it in a lot of different applications. So I use Quizlet a lot with flashcards with my lower level learners. They can see the word, they can flip back and forth, they can even use the audio to hear the word pronounced if they're having trouble remembering what these words sound like. I use Learn a lot with my lower levels as well because they can work through every single vocabulary word in your set and they have to show mastery by getting the answer correct 2 times for each word before it will let them learn all their words. I've also used Test to give my students practice with multiple choice or matching or fill in the blank. You can have them write out different things, but these are alternative activities. If I have a kid that just doesn't do well with an iPad activity, I can print out a test and they can practice on paper. The other one obviously is Quizlet Live. My students love to work in teams with Quizlet Live as they try to identify what these words mean, and you can go from one language to the other. So you could either show them the English and have them pick out the Spanish or show them the Spanish and have them pick out the English. This is an example of a class that is using Quizlet Live to practice their vocabulary words before a quiz, I think this was. Notice that we're in the cafeteria because with social distancing we had to spread out a lot. This group was not allowed to move and team up, which is the way they prefer to play Quizlet Live, but you can see their scoreboard is on the screen. They can see how they're doing compared to other students. They get questions on their iPad with 4 answers that they can choose from, so they are trying to beat their classmates to get 12, I believe, in a row correctly first, and they really seem to enjoy this. This is an example of Quizlet Live when you can play in teams. So this is the way my kids really prefer it. The tricky part is when you play in teams, you all see the question, but only one of your teammates has the correct answer. So you're looking at your options, but you may not be able to choose the correct answer, but you can still talk your group through it and help them find the right answer on their screen. My rule is always that they can only touch their own screen, so you can't have the person who really wants to win controlling everyone's iPad. This is an example of the Quizlet Learn. So it starts them off easy and they are given multiple choice questions. As they answer them correctly, they'll start to actually have to type in the answer. It shows the progress at the top. So he's still has 49 to go. 5 of them he's tried at least once and 0 have been mastered. Here's what happens if the student gets it wrong. So they are able to see the correct answer. That way they're bettering their understanding, and when they go back and see that question again, they should get it right the second time. When they're finished, this is what you will see for Quizlet Learn. So they will have mastered all 54 of the terms. They can pull this up at any time so I can check their progress and show me at the end that they have completed the assignment.
Once you've made your Quizlet sets, it's really easy to incorporate them into other things. One of those things is Blooket. Blooket is completely free, and we like it because you can do a game as a class, or you can assign it individually as homework, and they have to get a certain amount of points. You can see here that there are many different forms on Blooket, different sorts of games. So each of these that you see, Cafe, Factory, Battle Royale, those are different games all within the same site. So once you have your Quizlet flashcards, whatever they may be inside of Blooket, you can choose any of these games, change it up every day, and again, it's all free, so we really like that one. There are certain games that are only done individually or as class, but I would say the majority of them are either or.
And my students have really liked the Tower of Doom as individual practice, so I've had them do it sometimes for homework, or if I have to be out for a sub day. They can work through their words, but it's kind of like playing Pokemon. So they answer questions correctly, and then they get to choose their monsters, and their monsters fight other monsters, and they work through different levels and have a lot of fun. This is an example of a class playing a Blooket game, and you can see their little characters on the screen. They all choose their own character, and they're answering questions very much like Kahoot or Quizlet or Gimkit. But as they answer questions here, they are earning money to help them choose defenders. This is called Tower Defense, and they choose defenders that they put along their game board to fight the bad guys, and they are trying to get the most points. This is an example of a student playing through the Tower of Doom, the homework option that I can assign individually or to a whole class, and they work through at their own. They like to play and beat their teammates, but mostly it's a race against themselves to try to get through the game and all the way to the next stage or the next level. From the data end, this is what I can see after my students have played. So I can see how many things they got correct, how many were incorrect. I can go through by student and see how many levels they cleared, and again, how the percentage that they got correct while they were practicing those different terms. At the bottom, I can also go through by questions and figure out which ones were giving them the most trouble. And if you click on incorrect, it'll show you the most frequently missed questions so that you can go back and review those specifically in class. The same thing is true of Gimkit. So if you start with your Quizlet sets, you can copy and paste them directly into Gimkit. You can do multiple choice games, or you can do fill in the blank. And my kids always groan when I show them the fill in the blank version, but it's really nice, especially for grammar practice. If you want them to drop the AR and change the ending, they get immediate feedback of whether they answered it correctly or not, and they have the option to click on correct answer so they know what they did wrong for the next time. You do get free, with the free version, you get 5 kits. Or you can pay $5 a month for unlimited kits that you can save. I know I have one for every section that I do for vocab, and then a lot of my grammar sections as well. But it's nice because you can use it live in class or assign it for homework. And like Blooket, there are individual games, there are team games, there are different themed modes that keeps it interesting. I have liked it because it especially tends to engage my boys that maybe don't want to be there and don't want to learn a language, but when they get into competition mode, they can't help themselves. They want to practice this vocab to get better scores. So as you answer questions correctly, you will earn money, and then you can use your money to buy upgrades or attack other players.
Some of our kids that are more gamer type kids prefer this Gimkit because it has to use those skills. So my kids that know all the answers all the time will not always be the top ones because you have to know the gaming behind it, which is why it engages some of those other boys. Blooket, on the other hand, that we already talked about, a lot of those are more luck-based, where you take it as you get it instead of this one where you have to earn your money.
As you play Gimkit live, you can see the leaderboard up at the front of the class. If they are playing on teams, it does show you the dollar amounts, and it gives them updates on things that are happening, like people who are upgrading or teams that attack other teams. If you play individually, it doesn't show their money amount, so that's a nice feature too. Here you can see a student buying upgrades after he has answered questions correctly and earned enough money to do so. He goes through, he can buy things, he's adding them to other players right now. and he can chart his project as he goes through. If he were to miss a question, he can click to see the correct answer. This is the harder version. So these kids are actually having to conjugate verbs. Notice they have out their resources, they have out their notes. It's taking them a lot longer, so they're not going to earn as much money, but they're getting really good practice on conjugating these verbs. And again, it will show them if they get it wrong, they can click on show the right answer so that they can fix their mistake for the next time. The data piece for Gimkit is really nice because I can go through by student and see how many questions they've answered correctly, how many incorrectly, their percentage score overall. I can also go through by question, so I know which question they are having the most trouble with so that we can go back and review it in class. And if you scroll down, it'll show you the easier ones that everyone is getting right. This is a newer version of Gimkit called Draw That, and it's basically Pictionary, but the kids can play digitally using their device. We all have iPads, so it's very easy for them. The person that is drawing gets 3 words that they are allowed to choose from. So they pick the word they want to draw, and then they start drawing on their iPad. Every single student sees the picture being drawn on their own iPad as well as on the board where I projected it. If you notice at the top, it's also kind of like Hangman because it gives you the number of letters, and as the time runs out, the computer starts putting in letters to help the kids guess the correct word. If you see on the right, kids that are guessing it are getting recognized, and kids that make guesses that are incorrect are also recognized on the board so that they can feed off each other and work together.
I think everybody knows about Kahoot, but it's one to keep on the back burner as well. It's completely free. I think you can look up lots of things there or make your own, play it live, or assign it as a challenge. We have lots of teachers here that use it to study for tests, so they will ask if they can pull up their Kahoot for science, and that's one way that they study. The kids seem to like that.
Kahoot also does a great job with the data piece. Anytime you play a game, it will send you an email with the results from your game. If you assign it as a challenge, you can go back in and check student progress and see how each kid did individually. You can also post a leaderboard and reward students who did the best. You can also go back in and look at questions individually if you need to figure out what they're doing wrong. Vocab Ladders is something very low tech, but I have found it to be helpful when we work in partners. So oftentimes at the beginning of a unit, I assign vocab options and they have 4 days to practice and accumulate points for me. And as I'm checking, they are working with their partner on these ladders. And I just make this chart that has the French or Spanish on one side and English on the other. And then they fold that paper in half so that one kid is looking at the English and the other kid is looking at the Spanish or the French. And they start at the bottom of the ladder. And the idea is they try to get to the top first. So if I was working with my partner and I'm looking at Wednesday, I would have to say mercredi. And then I go up to Sunday and say, oh, I think that's bologna. And my partner's going to say, no, it's not bologna, it's dimanche. And then we have to flip-flop and trade roles. So they start at the bottom and try to go up. Anytime they mess up a word, they start back at the bottom and they race to get up to the top. These students are working together on their vocab ladders, so they are reviewing just for a couple minutes, but helping each other to learn these words and correcting each other if they make a mistake.
Something similar is dice verbs that we do with our kids, and we have done these a variety of ways as well. So what you're seeing, they roll the dice, and whatever number they get to, that's the verb form that they have to fill in. Obviously, we can do this with whatever tense we need. You can change your subjects to be less straightforward than the normal subject. Another way that I've done it, though, is with using inside-outside dice. So they're dice that have little dice inside them, and merely getting these out are like the excitement of the day because there's something different. And then on the inside, we will have on the board our subject pronouns, and on the outside, they're different verbs. We've done it against the timer. We've done the rock and roll dice where you have to get a certain or a certain number to conjugate, all sorts of ways. But bringing something physical, tangible into our conjugating seems to make life much more interesting.
And I will say I brought in D&D dice. So if you know anyone that plays Dungeons and Dragons and has the cool 20-sided dice or 12-sided dice or 10-sided dice, the kids really thought that was cool. And I had them play that they had to roll a 1. And the first person to say uno got to start conjugating their verbs. And then they had to roll for a 2. So the next person who could say dos was then able to start writing. And everyone else has to stop until they roll the right number. Vocab Races is another thing that's very low tech but tends to help some of my struggling learners. So what I do is create a chart like what you're seeing, and then we fold it in half, hamburger style, so that they're only seeing one list at a time. So there are actually 4 vocab races on a paper. And when I say ready, set, go, they just start identifying those vocabulary words. And at the beginning, especially for those struggling learners, it's really hard for them just to recognize those words. So we go through, whoever gets them all done first says done. I pronounce them in Spanish. They tell me what it means in English, and it gives those slower kids a chance to write down the correct answer. And then we start race 2. And we repeat a lot of the same vocabulary. So as we get to race 3 and 4, those kids that struggled at the beginning are like, oh yeah, I got this, I can do this, and it helps their confidence. So these students are racing to try to identify all of these French words before their classmates. Notice they do have out their packets. Sometimes I let them use it in case they need to look up a word. Sometimes I don't let them, and it makes it a little more challenging. It depends on the day. But they're hard at work and focused.
Story days is something new that I started this year, but you can get them pretty much anywhere. So I took a screenshot of some on Amazon, but honestly, I found my little tubs in the Target dollar spot zone for $3 for a little box of them. So it can work in lower levels, but I tend to use it more in the upper levels, although I did use it in Spanish too, and it was fine. But basically, just like you do in English, when you roll the dice and then you tell a story, my kids are doing the same thing, but in Spanish for our language. So for my Spanish 2s, where the vocabulary was a little trickier, I did give them a resource sheet that had a vocab list of the words that they didn't know. And I would tell them, for example, to put the story in past tense, since that's what we were working on. But in my upper levels, I can typically just give them the dice and they will go to town. If they don't know a word, they may have to look it up, but overall they did pretty well with it. And then again, you can adapt your story to whatever tense or whatever grammar concept you need, or just work on using all that vocab and grammar together. I like to give them a time limit because if not, they make these long, elaborate stories, but they don't get very far. So if I tell them they have 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then they can create their whole story. And we will then judge them for accuracy and creativity or whatever we need to look at the time. So these kids have just rolled their story dice. You'll see that there are 6 of them in the set that I have right now. They usually have something like nouns and maybe some emotions and some things that are suggesting verbs. So the first thing they're going to do is take a look at them and then put them in an order that they think makes sense for the story. And then one person is going to go ahead and start writing the story. They're working on it together. You can ask them to do certain things with it, like for example, if you want your story in the future tense versus the past tense, whatever they need to be working on. And it just gives them a little bit of freedom to be creative with their story as long as they're using those words. Another fun thing, if you're extra creative, is to make story stones. So basically the same thing as story dice, but you get some flat rocks at the Dollar Tree and you can paint on them. That way you have a little more control over the words and vocabulary that's in it. So here we have a few groups that are playing the partner A, partner B describing game. So I haven't thought of a great name for this. We usually say describe, dibuja, so describe and draw. But you'll see that each pair, one person has somebody looking at the screen, describing the picture that they see, and then the other person is facing with their back to the screen so that they cannot see the picture. So basically I give them a couple minutes. It's really important that they know their prepositions for this. When I've played it in other classes, lower level classes, I've given them a little cheat sheet of some prepositions to use, but this is a level 4 class, so they're just going with what they know. But basically the partner needs to describe what they're seeing in the picture, and then the other person has to draw it out. So I give them about 2, maybe 3 minutes, and then we all look at the screen and they show us our pictures and see how well they did. Another thing I like to do in class is to use awkward family photos as a sort of prompt for speaking or writing or whatever. I recommend that you can just Google awkward family photos, but definitely check them over and maybe put them on a slideshow or something to show the kids so that you're not Googling them in class, because some of them that come up are a little maybe not so school appropriate. But basically I will put this up, and for my lower levels, maybe I'll just have them describing what they're seeing, what the people are wearing, what's going on, how they're feeling. But for my upper levels, I will ask them to either make up a backstory, tell me what happened just before this picture or what happened just after this picture, or, based on the picture, you can kind of go anywhere. But instead of giving them a written prompt or something, sometimes I just like to throw one of these pictures up there and see what they can do with it. Another game that I like to play with my upper levels, although you could tweak it to play with your lower levels, is spoons. So you can kind of see that in the middle of the hallway are some clear plastic spoons. You could use pencils or whatever you need. But it works much like our regular card game spoons, except that I give them the cards. And the cards I just make out of index cards cut up. And the way I use it is to practice verb tenses. So I will ask them to find matches of 4 cards that all have the same subject, so I, you, he, she, and also verb, so to have, to dance, to eat. But it could be in any tense. So basically they're going to play spoons like regular. They have 5 cards in their hands and they're passing one around trying to find that match of 4. You could easily tweak it to be like vocabulary sets or, I don't know, numbers or whatever it is that you're working on, but basically you need to be able to group them into groups of 4 so that they are looking for the matched sets. This is kind of like the game headbands that you can buy at the store, but my kids tend to call it the chair game because we stick a chair in front of our whiteboard and whoever is guessing is going to sit in the chair. Throughout the year, I ask them to give me suggestions of words to describe, so they will write them on little slips of paper and we keep them in a Kleenex box. And then when we're ready to play, we just pull 3 words from that box and write them on the board. The job of the student in the chair is to just guess, to see if they can guess the word on the board, which is being described to them. In my classroom, I let the person in the chair speak Spanish or English, but everybody giving the clues has to use Spanish to describe it. So we have some rules that I recommend setting in place, such as no singing, no hand movements, no noises, no English, obviously. Also, they are not to use any parts of the word. So if, for example, the word is rainbow, they can't say the word rainbow or even rain, right? But otherwise, they just have to use words to describe it. It's a really good way to get them using circumlocution. And the first few times we play it, I remind them that when they are in a foreign country and they forget a word or don't know a word, it's a good idea to do the same thing, but obviously with hand motions and with any other words they can think of. Noises, whatever they need to get by. But it's a great way to teach them circumlocution and to review all the vocab that they know and maybe haven't used recently. And then we just split the class into 2 teams and we just keep track of points for teams. I usually give them about 90 seconds per person. And they love it. They just think it's a great old time and they don't realize that they're learning important skills. Some other board games that you might be able to adapt to use to your class in your classroom are Scattergories. You can always find some of these sheets on the web if you just Google it. Or Boggle. There are also sheets that we know have certain words in it if you Google that as well, like French Boggle or Spanish Boggle. You can find some things to project that will show them instead of the actual little die that have the letters. I have a game called Verba that I bought at an OFLA conference, but basically it's apples to apples, so the kids really like to play that. Scrabble or Bananagrams, you can either do it the real way with the letters or just give them a bunch of Bananagrams and see what words they can come up with. We sometimes do that on our days where we have a little extra time and they're really proud of themselves for, figuring out how to place the words together and everything. There's another little game called Spot It that comes in a tin. I have the Spanish version that I just bought on Amazon, but basically it matches either a word or a picture of the word, or you could have 2 pictures of the same word or 2 of the same written word. But basically you put 2 of those little cards out and the first person to spot the match just says the word and they win. or even 20 questions. We had a really, really nice day, and one of my classes was ahead of the other class, so we spent 10 minutes walking the track and playing 20 questions, just speaking out loud, and they did a really good job with it. So those are some things that you might have at home or be able to get that you could always bring into the classroom to kind of mix it up. These are also great things to do as maybe like a Spanish club or honor society game night. And then the last thing isn't really a game, but we wanted to bring it up. Flipgrid has been a very valuable resource, especially in the last year with Corona. We used it with our ESL kids and our Spanish kids, but essentially it's like a discussion board. So I can post the first one and say, tell me about your family, or what did you do last summer, or whatever I need, and each kid can then respond, but it's all like little videos of them, so it's all oral instead of written. It's completely free. It's really user-friendly and teacher-friendly because everybody has their own profile, I guess, using their school email, and you can see each kid and they can make comments on each other's, and it's easy for me to grade them that way because it's very well organized and well laid out. So they can go straight to Flipgrid and record there, or you can use it for presentations. We have iPads, so we use clips to make our presentations, and then they can just upload it right there. So that's a way that we have done our presentations in Spanish 4, or just work on interpersonal speaking. It's completely free. Again, you will have to type in the endings of their emails. So for us, it's students.marlingtonlocal. So that keeps it secure so that anybody that does not have a student.marlingtonlocal.org address cannot access it. But all the kids in that class can still see each other's and view each other's and comment on each other's. So this is a shot of the Flipgrid that we have. This is just an old one that I have. But I wanted to show you that over here on the side, you can see the pictures that the kids put in, as well as their names and how many people have viewed it. But also you can click on these here, the comments that other kids have made. So each of the kids can see each other's. It's kind of like a discussion board, but it has videos instead of just written comments. So they can watch her video and then they can add a comment, and then they can make their own comments. They can talk to each other, and you can go through and see how many people have turned their original responses here, 18 for example, as well as the kids that are commenting. So it's a very easy to use interface. The kids caught on very quickly, even when we just had a quick 5 minutes to do it before we knew that we were going remote last spring. So very easy to use and a very good way to do both presentational and interpersonal speaking. Obviously the interpersonal speaking is going to be a little bit broken up because they'll watch the original video and then they'll post theirs, and they'll have to go in and see the comment and respond back. But it gets the job done, especially if there are no other options. I've used this in other classes to do their presentations, and they will just do their presentation on there, and then I'll ask them to watch 2 or 3 others and maybe ask a question or make a comment or something along those lines. But yeah, it's free and it's a very easy to use thing, so highly recommend that.
We hope you found something that you can use in your classrooms. Thanks for watching and listening. If you have any questions or would like to see some of these games in action, our unsession will be Thursday, June 14th at 10 a.m. Adios.